Alright guys, welcome back to the video. So I am back, I am alive, I'm still a little bit sick, it just does not want to let go, it's still stuck in my head a little bit. But I am so bored of just sitting around waiting to get better that I want to get back out in the shop and do something. It was a pretty productive week. I got, I think, 4 or 5 pieces of furniture all designed, the plans all set up and ready for them. So I just have to start doing them. So that'll be really nice as we kind of get into a roll here. But what we're going to be doing in today's video is starting a hand tool only box. So I've got these 2 pieces of walnut and a few more stashed behind me here that I cut up a while back when in plans to make some just small box. Now the nice thing about these pieces is that we are going to be kind of cheating in this hand tool only box because these pieces are not a normal piece of 4/4 stock that you could buy at a lumberyard. They, I believe, are just over 5/8 of an inch thick, which is what I like for box. So I am slightly cheating there, but again, I do have these pieces laying around, and so everything else I'm going to be doing to these is going to be with hand tools only. Now right at the top of the video here, I'm going to say that I have no idea if I'm actually going to be able to do this. My knowledge of how to use hand tools and all the different procedures you have to do with hand tools in order to make something like this is very limited, and it's going to be very interesting to find out whether or not I can actually take what I know about hand tools and make something as simple as a box. Because working with machinery and all that is actually super easy. You know, you pass something over the face of a jointer, you know it's gonna come out. When you pass something through your planer, you know it's gonna get a nice flat face on it, and that face is gonna be perfectly parallel to that other face that you flattened on the jointer. Same thing on the table saw. You know when you pass it through, as long as you double check that blade, which is very easy to adjust, you're gonna get a perfect cut every single time. Whereas with hand tools, it's all about knowing how to use the tool to get things to be the sizes and dimensions and all that kind of stuff that you want. Anyway, the thing that I know that I need to start with is just getting these pieces squared up. Okay, so that was what I knew was going to be probably one of the more challenging parts of this whole thing, is trying to figure out how to get these pieces flat. Because ever since I got into woodworking, all I've ever used is a jointer, a planer, table saw, and all that to get my boards perfectly milled up. So this whole idea of getting these things flattened without any of that stuff that just kind of does it for you was really challenging, and definitely takes, and they're nowhere near perfect. Like, I'm sure if I just went and did these same pieces over those 3 machines, they'd come out just perfect. You know, it really would make life a lot easier. But right now, I've got them to a point where I think that I can work with them. So again, it should be made clear that I really am struggling to know what I'm supposed to be doing here. But I think right now my pieces are square on all sides as much as I can get them. So to walk you guys through the process, because it's actually pretty simple, all I started by doing is getting one side flat. So the same thing you do on the jointer, you're just getting one side nice and flat with the hand plane. And so the important thing here is you're gonna need some kind of a winding stick. So that's what you just saw me use here. These are Veritas ones. They've got these silver lines on them, and you just use that to make sure that you're taking any twist out of the board. Because these boards were pretty well twisted when I started working with them. So you get one side flat, then you use the marking gauge to figure out the thickness that you want. So in here, we're going with a 1/2 inch thickness on both pieces. So then I was able to set my marking gauge to a 1/2 inch, reference off of that new flat side that I have, and just put a line all the way around. Then when I started hand planing that other face, all I had to do was get down to that line on all 4 sides. Again, I went through and checked for twist and all that with my winding sticks, used the straight edges, all that kind of stuff to make sure that we didn't have any of those other issues. But for the most part, just by hitting that marking gauge line, I know that I'm pretty good to go. Then I used my shooting board to square up both ends, as well as to start on some of our edge work here. Then I finished off the edge work in the Moxon vise. Now the edges were very challenging to get nice and square, and I think they're still not anywhere near perfect, like I said already. There's definitely some spots where there's still a little bit of an angle, and I might try and refine it a little bit more. But the important thing here is that our pieces right now are the same width, and they're the same width from each end, as far as I can tell. The only way I can check that these are actually square is by setting my combination square here to one side, and then checking it the other side, and then just checking for the feel of it. So anytime you're checking for feel, it's going to be less accurate. But again, that's a nice thing, because we're working with all hand tools here. Everything can be pretty easily adjusted. So once we get our dovetails all fitted up, we can adjust our dovetails so that everything fits. Then once we have everything glued up, we can then go back in and readjust things so they're all sitting nice and flat. So it's really not that important right now that these pieces are perfectly the same width to each other, because everything will become referential to each other later on. So it's definitely an interesting thought process. It's very different thinking compared to, you know, your machinery and that, where right off the get-go, right from your milling process, you need to have perfectly squared up stock. Here, you need stock that is mostly squared. You know, it definitely makes it easier the more square it is, but it doesn't need to be absolutely perfect. Whereas when you're dealing with machinery, most of the time you need perfectly squared up stuff. So the next thing we're gonna do here is we're gonna take these pieces and split them into 2. So we're gonna have one long one short one, and that's gonna make up our front and our sides. Then we need to go through and get all 4 of the pieces down to equal length. So we're gonna use the shooting board for that. And again, we just need to make sure we're squaring up the end grain with the edges that we now have on here, all of that kind of stuff. Okay, so for this next part, I'm going to be using my lead jig, not for actually cutting any kind of dovetails or anything, but purely for transferring our marks over. Because we now have our tails cut on our tail boards, we need to get our pins marked on our pin boards. So I'm going to be using the jig here to hold the pin board vertical and the tail board in its horizontal position, line everything up. Then normally I would use a little jig that I built that just sits in my moccasin vise and lets me do the exact same thing. But I have no idea where that went, and I think I probably threw it out the last time I cleaned up because I just thought it was a piece of random MDF sitting around. But I just want to make sure everyone understands that you don't have to use a lead jig to pass your marks over on your dovetails. You can use quite literally anything that'll hold your pieces at a nice square corner. I just conveniently have this thing sitting around, so I might as well use it. Okay, so we now actually have a box that is coming together. Now, our dovetails didn't come up very well. We are a little bit on the twisted side, but we'll clean all that up once we've got everything glued up and together. Plus, it is worth mentioning that these are probably some of the worst dovetails I've ever cut. They've got tons of gaps in that in them. I'm very rusty on hand cutting dovetails. So yeah, I'm not really surprised that they're not looking too great. But once we get everything glued up together, we can still use some filler in that to, make things look a little bit better than they do right now. But anyway, now we have the thing that has made me put off doing this for so long, and that is cutting the grooves on the inside that we're going to use to hold in our lid and the base. Actually, while I'm sitting here thinking about it, this groove might actually be easier than I initially thought, because I have my little router plane, my little Veritas router plane. I also have this fence that comes with it. Overall, this is going to be a very challenging bit. But again, like I said before, this is the thing that has made me not do this for so long. It's just purely because I have no idea how to get this groove. So I'm just going to mess around with it, figure it out. This whole box is all about learning how to work with some hand tools a little bit more effectively. So yeah, I'm just going to experiment, play around with it, and see what I can figure out. Okay, so we now have our grooves in there. I decided to just punch all the way through. We'll fill it out or something afterwards, honestly. Right now, I'm just trying to get this box done. I'm not actually going for something that is going to be probably one of the nicer pieces I've made. Right now, the whole hand tool only thing is just presenting enough of a challenge. And this thing is overall just going to look pretty rough anyway, so I'm not super concerned about it. I just want to try and get it done. Because now we're on to the part that is really just going to annoy the heck out of me. And that is making our top and bottom panels that are going to fit into that groove we just cut. So I managed to find a few pieces here. We've got a small piece of white oak and a piece of walnut here. That should be just about perfect for what we need. The trick is here is going to be getting these down thin enough to fit into our grooves. So they need to be just under 1/4 of an inch. and then getting them down to the proper width and length and all that kind of stuff. So I've got all the measurements for our pieces. They need to be 9.5 inches long or right around there, and then our width needs to be 5 and 11/16. So if I wasn't using hand tools only here, this would be about a 30-second process, because I would start by hitting the pieces on the bandsaw, getting them down to a rough width, over the joiner to get one face, then through the planer to get everything down to its final 1/4 inch thickness, finish everything off by putting it all through the table saw. We'd have 2 perfectly squared up pieces. We'd throw it in the box, glue it up, and it would be done in a matter of seconds, maybe more like minutes. But overall, it'd be a very quick process. Whereas now, with the hand tools, this is gonna hurt. And I know it's gonna hurt because we have a lot of surface area here that we need to get flat, and we need to get fairly accurately flat over the width. But the trick is that these panels are also not gonna have a tendency to stay nice and flat when I'm hand planing them. So this is, yeah, it's gonna be a challenge, but we're just gonna try and power through it. Because once we get these panels put together, then we can glue this box up. Then that's it for today. Then tomorrow when we come back in, then we actually get to start moving on to some of the other parts of this that, again, I have no idea how to even approach them. Okay, so that is going to do it for today. We've got it all glued up. Tomorrow when we come back in, we'll split the lid off, do all of our finishing touches on this thing. It does not look great. I'm not going to lie about that. But like I've said a few times, I'm just seeing it through at this point. Now, I'm also not too sure how I'm going to fill those gaps that we have on the sides there where we actually ran that groove all the way through. I might make some filler pieces, or I might just leave them there as a painful reminder of some of the bad decisions I had to make while making this box. And I'm going to leave all those decisions till tomorrow because I want to see how this thing looks once I get the clamps off it, once I start cleaning it up. That'll give me a better idea of what I'm actually dealing with here. Because right now we do have a functional box. It is a fully seated box. The dovetails all went together pretty nicely, you know. Again, like I already said, not the nicest dovetails I've ever cut, but highly functional. So I'm going to leave this till tomorrow. So that means tomorrow we come back into the shop, we'll be able to take the clamps off, do a little bit of cleanup work, figure out how the heck we're going to split the lid off, because I still have no idea how I'm going to do that. I've only ever done that on either the bandsaw or the table saw. So it's going to be an interesting thing trying to figure out how to get that lid off there while keeping it somewhat square, for the most part square. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting day tomorrow as we finish up this box. But as always, guys, I do hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next one.